Hi, boys and girls. Hope you've had a good week and maybe you've even been able to see some of your friends this week. I'm waiting for my friend. Do you remember from last week? My friend Rufus? He was supposed to be here, but I don't know where he's at. Oh, hi Rufus. You're, you're looking very, very sad. Isn't Rufus looking very sad? You're still very shy and you don't want to talk? Okay. Well, is something up? What's up? You're feeling sad because you were doing some baking and it didn't go very well. Well, why don't you tell me all about it? So you went online and you looked up a recipe. Okay. So you looked it up and you found a great recipe for pancakes and you looked carefully at all the instructions because you have to follow the recipe, yeah. So you found out how much you needed of everything and wrote it down and remembered it. Okay. So then what did you do? Ah, you started to weigh out the ingredients. That makes sense. And did you make sure you weighed them out and you had the right amount of everything? Yep. So you start off with everything, all the dry things, and then you made the wet part. Okay. You even got to melt butter in the microwave. Oh, that sounds like good fun. How long did that take? Not very long. Okay, so you added some milk and eggs to the butter, and then you had to add in all the dry stuff you had already measured out. Okay, that makes sense. Okay. Then you whisked it all together, made sure it was all mixed in, and then you started to spin it out into the pan. Okay, that makes sense. How did they go? Well, the first ones looked a bit rubbish, but the first ones always look rubbish whenever you make pancakes. Ah, but the rest of the batch was good. That's good. I'm glad they weren't all bad. So you spinned it in, and then what? Ah, you had to flip it over. Okay. So once one side was nice and golden brown, you flipped it over. That sounds like great fun. I don't understand why you're feeling so sad, Rufus. What's wrong? Yeah, so you made your lovely big stack of pancakes and you piled them all on top of each other, but then you looked at the recipe and you saw the old picture and you realised that yours doesn't really look that great compared to it. Oh, Rufus, that's really sad. Rufus, you might have followed the recipe the whole way through and measured everything out right, everything out perfectly, and mixed it and cooked it at the right temperature, did everything right, but it still didn't work out like the picture. You have to follow the recipe very, very carefully, but sometimes it's still not enough. You know, you tried it earlier, didn't you? I'm sure those pancakes tasted great though. So even though you might have a recipe and follow it, it still doesn't always work out perfectly. And boys and girls, you know, we have are like a recipe for our lives. We have instructions to follow and we find them in the Bible. God has given us some instructions or a recipe for how to live our lives. And the Bible contains all of the ingredients that we need to live a life full of blessings. God wrote those instructions for us. Just like a baker might decide what ingredients to put in to make a delicious pancake, Rufus, God has decided and determined what we need in our lives to make our lives better. Now, God didn't write this instructions, He didn't write His word, the Bible, so our lives would be boring or hard to live. Instead, God wrote a recipe for life to help us to know how to live happy, healthy lives. And sometimes we think that God's rules are hard to follow. Maybe there's too many ingredients, or we get confused about how much of each thing to use. But the truth is that if we follow God and follow his recipe exactly, it'll be perfect. It'll come out just like He says it is. And Rufus, you know how your pancakes didn't work out perfectly earlier? Yeah, remember? Sometimes we don't follow God's instructions perfectly either. We fall short. We have this thing called sin that separates us from God. And even though we might try as best as we possibly can, we'll never, ever get things perfect. And that's why God sent Jesus. God sent Jesus because he knew that we could never do it by ourselves. He gives us this great example in his son Jesus as somebody who could keep his rules perfectly. He kept all of God's rules and obeyed him with all of his thoughts and words and all of his actions. And boys and girls, whenever he died on the cross, he took the punishment for our sin, the punishment that separates us from God. And if we trust that his sacrifice on the cross is good enough to make us right with God, if we fully believe in Jesus, that he is our Saviour, well then we will be saved and we will be able to be right again with God. God always wants us to live our lives just like he intended, according to his perfect recipe. But we can't do it. We need to be made right with Jesus.